For the purposes of practice, we're going to take a look at CO2 science in evaluating some of their overall climate change ideas. The purpose of this site is to reject the main scientific consensus that is associated with climate change today. So, we're going to evaluate the scientists first. We're going to focus on how does their degree match the field, how do their publications match the field, and is it a top publisher? So, there are two main contributors to the site, Craig Idso, Sherwood Idso. We can look them up on Wikipedia. We're going to be mainly using Wikipedia and Google Scholar for these examinations because of overall neutrality, and the citations must be cited in each of those cases. There are brief um, biographies on the site for each of those two contributors, uh, detailing some of their works and some of the things that they've had success in. Focusing first on Craig Idso, looking at his overall education, he shows degrees in geography, agronomy. Agronomy is more of a uh, focus on how the production of plants is used for agricultural food, fiber, and overall things like that. So, how do we use plants to further life on the earth? And he got his PhD in geography as well. His doctoral thesis was on phase changes of carbon dioxide cycles. So, there is some moderate level of focus on meteorological aspects, geographical aspects. Depending on what his focus was on his degree in geography, he could have gotten more or less climate science from that. Many climate science experts will tend to have degrees in things outside of geography, more specialized on different areas of the actual environment. So that would be one thing that would throw up a slight bit of a red flag here. Looking at the other, Sherwood. Sherwood, his background started out in physics, then soil science, not necessarily atmospheric science. So, publishing different materials associated with climate science when most of his degrees are on things either related to physics or soil science. He did have a minor in meteorology, which means that he has some tangential overall expertise, would be where we would possibly be a little bit more skeptical in terms of what he is overall putting out there. But this is kind of why we look into the background of the education, because we really want to be finding things from the experts of these associated fields. If we look into in Google Scholar where they're finding their work, if you look at Craig's background, most of his publishes excuse me, what he's published is on co2science.org, in terms of what he's produced and put out there. So, in terms of evaluating his overall expertise, and whether or not he's on the top of the field, he's on one single individual website. He has contributed to some other articles, mainly his work with plant and overall carbon dioxide concentrations is where you see him with like Penn State, and some other institutions like that. So he does have some respect in terms of overall looking at plants to overall carbon dioxide concentrations, but that is something where you kind of see his agronomy background coming in on how plants tend to grow in those different types of environments. With Sherwood, Sherwood tended to, he had some things on USDA. He was very, very well accepted in terms of the soil work that he does. So, measuring and interpreting plant stress, full spectrum amounts of radiation, lake stability, his work with the soils and the parts of the earth that are associated with that tended to be more put forth by these other journals like the USDA, academia, and other things of that nature. So that is kind of where we would make some of our assertions that maybe these aren't necessarily the most qualified people that we would be wanting to get our information from. They definitely show some levels of knowledge and some levels of background in terms of overall climate science. But whenever you're looking at the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change, overall 99% of articles and scientists out there are putting forth a scientific consensus on this point. Okay, we will talk a little bit more in terms of the next two videos on scientific consensus associated with climate change, as well as why we might have some overall conflict of interest with this site.